VR dev for non-coders. My name is Mark Lawrence from Pengu Studios, and today we are talking about super futuristic laser space guns and raycasting. So let's get cracking. So here we are back in our project Cuber 3. So let's start by creating an empty game object. So create empty, and in the inspector we are going to name it Player Raycast Manager. So in the past I've been going with controller, today with manager, tomato. Yeah. So you can name them whatever you want to. So let's just move this SteamVR thing out of the way a little bit. What are we going to do with the Player Raycast Manager? So let's reset the transforms and then add FSM. We're going to call this controller listener. So we want this kind of targeting aim system. So when we're going to touch the trigger lightly, our aiming system appears, and then we can aim to the objects we want to shoot, and then we're going to actually shoot them by pressing the controller trigger all the way down. So we're going to do that today. So first, in the controller listener, we're going to add an action, search for trigger, get trigger, and we're going to use the right controller. So let's go back into here and right controller. There we go. And now we're going to use the touch instead of the press. So touch is light and press is more firmer. So now if touch down is true, we're going to create a new event, and we're going to call it touched, an event not used by this state. So then just click on this red field and it creates it for you. Amazing. Now intensity of touch, I thought before it was how firm you have to press, but it is actually the vibration that you get in the actual controller. So in here, I would say I don't want anything. Okay, so and then check it every frame. So now, then we can move on to a new state, and we call this event Raycast. There we go, and let's make a transition to that one. And before we start raycasting, let's just copy this get trigger event. Copy that and paste it over here. And this time we want to make a release event. So when we're not touching anymore, we want to go back into the listener. So click on the red field and then connect it back to the controller listener state. Okay. So everything should be fine here. So now let's start looking at the Raycast action. And there is the one. And let's put it on top of the get trigger. So there's a few things we want to do here. We want to make sure that we raycast from the controller. So specify game object, we're going to raycast from the right controller, and then we're going to define the direction it's going to go from the controller. So I've been doing some tests and I know that we want to raycast on the Z space and in the self space, and then let's say we want to raycast the distance of 20 units. Now let's just see that everything's the way it should, and how we're going to test it already here is we're going to use the debug system here. So click on that, and then it will draw us a line that shows where we're raycasting. So let's make this window a little bit bigger. So when we test, we see what we're doing. So I'm going to press play. And then I'm just going to go and get my controllers and see if we get any kind of raycast line once I touch the trigger. Exciting. And there it is. You can see the debug line. And when I release, we go back into the listener state. Beautiful. Okay, if you're wondering why my Unity changed into red, I've made some changes here at Pengu Studios. Things are moving forward, but probably you're familiar with the problem that you press play and something's not working, and then you rush in to change parameters, and then you realize that you're in play mode, and then you turn it off, and then you lose all the settings that you put in. So that's why I've made this huge red thing appear, that I don't make that mistake so often, at least. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. Let's go away from play mode, and then let's go to edit and preferences, and then you have this colors tab here, and play mode tint. Here I think you were in white if you haven't done anything about it, and I just changed it into red. So it tints the view red every time you press play. You can do any color you like. So there we go. A little bit of a bonus lesson for you today. Very good. Yeah. So, right. Let's carry on with our Raycast. We need quite a lot of information from this Raycast, so we're going to go down one by one. So store did hit. So we want to know if we're hitting something or not. And let's create a new variable for that. We'll call it hit miss. Spelling really difficult for me today. And then we want to store the object that we've hit. So let's make a new variable here as well. And we call it object hit. And then we want to store the point where we hit the object. So let's do a new variable here as well. And we call it hit point. And let's also store the distance, how far this object is. So let's create a new variable, and we call it hit distance. There we go. So I think for now, that's the information we need. Also, we want to start filtering what kind of objects we want to hit. So the vision is that we have certain kinds of cubes that we punch and certain kinds of cubes that we shoot. Does that sound good? Yes, it does. So let's go forward. So let's create a layer mask. And the elements that we want to shoot, we will use the layer enemy to shoot. Now, because I've practiced, I've created this layer already, but you don't have that. So let's go add layer. And in the inspector, find an empty field and then type in enemy to shoot, for example. And then you are good to go. So let's go back into our player Raycast manager, and element 1, we're gonna use enemy to shoot. Okay. So I think we are good. Yes. So now our Raycasting should work fine. Let's test that actually. Now, what I haven't done before is also this debug thing. So here we have that tick box for debug. If I take it out, those kind of grayish fields disappear. So these show what these variables actually have inside them. So now let's create a enemy object here. Game object, 3D object, and cube. Let's call this evil cube to shoot. Amazing. And let's reset those transforms. And let's raise it up a little bit, 0.5. And then let's move it here. So it's this massive thing that we cannot miss. Let's actually make a material for it as well. So let's click on the evil cube material and then Control D to duplicate. And we'll call this shoot. And let's make it blue. Yes, blue is scary as well. Okay, so now we have this big massive evil cube that we want to shoot. And let's check that it has a box collider. And let's make it trigger so we don't have to worry about collisions and stuff. Okay, so now if my calculations are correct, if we go to the Raycast manager and we can look at these variables here and we press play and let's go back into here. Everything's a little red, but I think we can see it. Let me just go get my controllers again and then we'll see if things are working. So now I'm hitting the cube. And nothing's happening. So let's just see why is that. So, evil cube to shoot, it's the layer. So let's change this layer to enemy to shoot. Okay, let's try one more time. And let's go into our Raycast manager. Let's go into the Raycast action, no, state. And then let's just see if we can move this just right. And there we go. Now, did hit shows true. Hit object, evil cube to shoot. Store hit point changes and distance changes in real time. So things are working as they should. Excellent. Okay, so looks like we are done with our Raycast manager today. Now let's move on to drawing a laser line that we're going to use to aim. So we're going to create a new game object, create empty. Let's reset those transforms and we'll call this one draw line manager. Okay, and we're gonna right click to add FSM, and the first state we are going to call the same thing as before, controller listener. Let's actually copy this one and move it here and paste, and then defines a start state. Yes, I do want to replace the current one. Nice one. So now when we touch the controller, we want to shoot this aiming laser, and then we're going to move into a new state, and we'll call this state draw line. There we go. And let's again get the release action from the Raycast manager and copy that one, get trigger and copy selected actions, and let's go to the draw line manager and paste actions. Good. And then we have this release event. Let's click on the red field. Nope, I put it in the wrong place, so let's remove that action. Let's go to the draw line state and then paste actions, and then click on the red field, and then we move back into the listener state. Now let's just check that everything is as it should. When touchdown is false, release, that looks great. So now we want to draw a line, and we can draw our lock here, line, draw debug line, we're doing that already, and line cast 2D. So we don't really have what we want. So this is where something awesome comes to play, and that is the Playmaker Ecosystem. So I'll go to the Playmaker menu and choose download add-ons. Your browser will start, and then you want to get this ecosystem browser and download the package here. And let's just see where it ended up. Show in folder. Let's go to the root of our assets and then grab this ecosystem and drag and drop it into the project. And let's import it. And we are good. So let's just close that browser. Now, if we go to Playmaker menu and to add-ons, we have ecosystem here and ecosystems browser. And let's type in draw line search. And usually for me, it comes here in the bottom. So let's just get it. It's downloading, compiling, and soon it will appear here. Amazing. So let's close our ecosystem. So now let's go to Drawline Manager, Drawline State, and double click on the Drawline action. Okay, so what do we want to do with this one? We want to draw a line from the controller. So start object, we'll use the controller. End object, we're going to create now a new end object. So let's go to the controller right and let's choose game object and create empty child. And we'll call this line target. And let's check what its transforms are. And the transforms are 0. So let's write 20 here to match the length of the debug line, for example. So let's go into our line manager and draw a line. Let's actually move the get trigger action to the bottom. And end object, then we want to use the line target. Okay. And then we're going to get a nice laser material for it. So let's create a new material. And let's duplicate the evil cube shoot material. And let's call this laser gun material. And let's make it this nice greenish, bluish, turquoise thingamajiggy. And let's go back into Drawline Manager and assign that material into it. We don't want to cast shadows. Let's make it quite narrow, so maybe 0.01 and then 0.01. And we're going to do that every frame. And then we exit this state. We want to destroy the line that we've drawn. All right, so let's just see what happens now if we go and press play. Okay, so here we have the debug line, and if we turn off the Raycast debug, we see the blue laser line here, and we see it in the game view as well. Awesome. Okay, so let's just check the debug line is still there. Great. Okay, so now our laser sights are working. Let's move onwards and upwards. So now, if we're looking at aiming for an object, now if I press play and I'll show you what's happening. So now as you see, the lines are going through the cube. So especially if we turn off the debug line again, you see the blue line is just going through the cube. And I would like it to kind of show that, okay, now we're hitting the cube and stop at the object that we can actually shoot. So let's make that mechanism happen. So what we're going to try and do is change where this line target is so it matches where the ray hits the enemy object. So let's just go to line target and add an FSM. Okay, and here, this one we're gonna call listener. And we're gonna get the hit or miss information from the Raycast manager. So get bool, get FSM bool. So we're gonna get it from the player Raycast manager. Specify game object, player Raycast manager. FSM name, FSM, variable name, hit and miss. And we're going to store the value in a new variable that we call hit miss. Now we could have just made this hit miss variable global in the player Raycast manager, but if we start going down that path, we're going to have a huge list of global variables. And it gets really messy really fast. Those global variables are shared between scenes, and yeah, you can kind of start seeing the mess we can create like that. So what we can do is we can just start bouncing around these variables by just getting them from different FSMs. And this is a good way of doing that. So we're going to get that FSM bool, and we're going to do that every frame. And then we're going to test the bool test. And we're going to use that hit and miss. If it is true, we're going to go to an event called hit. And that's going to go into a new state. And here we're going to set the Z value of the line target's position. All right, and then we're going to do that every frame. And then let's copy these actions, copy selected actions into here as well. And this time we want to test if it is false. So new event and miss. Oh, well, that went terribly wrong. Let's correct that name here. Too fast for my own good, and then click on the red field and connect those two. All right, so when we are not hitting anything, we're stuck in this state, and then we're hit something, we're going into this state, and this is where we want to set a different position for the line target. So let's search for get float, get FSM float. And what's the information we want to get here? We want to again go to the Raycast manager, into its FSM, and this time we want to get the hit distance. And we want to store the variable as a new variable, and we call it hit distance. And we're going to check that every frame. Okay, so then we want to set the line target's position. Set position. And very nicely, we can set these on the X, Y, and Z separately. So here we're going to do the hit distance. Space self every frame. We're good. Now then, when we flow back into the listener, we want to set the distance to where it used to be, and that was 20 units away. So let's copy this one. And let's go here and paste actions. We put it on the top. And then here we choose 20 instead. Okay, so let's just see if we can test this now. Let's go to the draw line manager. And let's make the line a little bit fatter so we can see better if we want to look at it from the scene view. And yeah, let's just press play and see what happens. I'm actually going to make this game view a little bit bigger. Maybe even maximize on play and see if we can look at it in VR. Okay, so that worked great. So the laser line interacted nicely with our evil cube object. All right, so let's just see what the next step is. Now we want to actually start shooting things. So let's create another manager. Game object, create empty. We'll call that shoot manager. And let's reset its transforms. And drag it close to the other manager. And right click to add an FSM. So let's call this first state has target question mark. And we're gonna again look at that hit and miss bool. So we can copy that nicely from the line target. And we choose these two actions and copy them and go into our shoot manager and then paste actions here. Okay. So now let's create a new event. Instead of hit, we're going to call it has target. And transition has target. Great. Okay. So then once we have a target, we're going to go to a new state. And let's call it shoot. And here again, we're going to get a variable from another FSM. This time we want to get the game object that we're hitting. So get FSM object, game object. And then again, let's use the Raycast manager and set the FSM name. And this time object that we hit. And we're going to get that just once, so we don't have to click every frame. And then we want to again get the hit and miss bool from the Raycast manager. So let's get these two bad boys and copy selected actions. And let's go to the shoot manager and then paste them right here. So now what we want to do is, if we have a target, we want to be able to shoot. But if we don't have a target, if our hand wobbles and we lose the target, we want to go into that state that's looking for the target. So now what we're actually testing is if we don't have the target. So let's create a new event and we call this no target. And we check that every frame. So now add transition, no target. And if we don't have a target, it flows back here. But as long as we have a target, we're going to be in this state. And there we can then get the trigger again. And this time we want to press. So we want to press all the way down. And when we do that, then it's going to actually shoot. So let's create a new event and we call this shoot. And let's add that here, and that flows into a new state. And let's make sure that we do this every frame. And here we can choose. Now, when we're aiming, we chose for the controllers not to have some haptic feedback. So now if we're in this state, now we're touching all the time because we're aiming, remember, in that other manager we're aiming now. So we're touching the trigger. So then it's going to pick up the intensity of touch vibration from this action now. So we can choose whether to leave it on or leave it off. So in here, I guess it's going to be cool if we're actually having an object in our sights, and it's going to kind of notify that by vibrating one of the controllers in our hand. So let's leave that on for now. And then we're going to move into the shoot state. And once we press a little bit firmer, And let's call this state destroy. So if I'm not totally mistaken, this state is good. Okay, so then moving on to the destroy state. So here we just want to destroy an object. And which object do we want to destroy? Well, it is the Raycast hit object. So we're gonna have to get that variable again. So that variable isn't here for some reason, so let's go. We haven't saved it here, so let's create a new variable, object hit. So now we have the object hit variable in this FSM as well. There it is. So now we're going to destroy that object hit. And once we've done that, we're going to add a transition finished, and we go back into searching for a target. Let's make it visually pleasing. There. Now that is just beautiful. Okay, so now if I'm not totally mistaken right now, we should be able to go into VR and aim and shoot this massive enemy cube. So let's give that a go. So maximize on play again. We'll press play and give it a shot. Pun intended. Okay, so our aiming laser is on, and then we're going to press the trigger. And nothing happens. We haven't chosen a controller. So let's put that controller in here. That should work much better now. So, our aiming laser. Ooh, now the controller is vibrating. And then we're gonna press the trigger all the way in, and success. Perfect. So far so good. So let's just see if we can incorporate all of this into our game. So evil cube to shoot. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's just check what our old cube looked like. Evil cube 020202 is the scale. So I've created this prefab here already when I practiced. Let's delete that. Okay, so we go to our object in the scene and then change the scale. And then let's change the position as well. And here we are. So we have a nice prefab for this bad boy. We'll drag it into the project window. It makes it into a prefab. And now we want to go to the spawn controller. And in the spawn state, where we are creating objects, we want to get this evil cube to shoot in the mix. So now let's create a action. Let's see, random object. Select random game object. Sounds great. Double click on that. And let's put it there on the top. We want to choose between two different ones. And the ones we want to choose between are evil cube and evil cube to shoot. And then you can choose a weight here. So if you want the evil cubes to come twice as often as the evil cubes to shoot, you can change that, but equality, I believe in that. So where we're going to store this, we're going to create a new variable for this, and we're going to call it evil cube to spawn game object variable. And then in the create object action, we're going to change the game object field into a variable, evil cube to spawn. All right, So that should start rocking. Okay, let's see what happens if we play this now. Actually, let's put the other structures in place now as well. So remember here, if we catch the cube, we want to send an event. So it goes back to the initialize, because otherwise it's going to go to the punish state and we're going to lose a point. So let's put that mechanism in place. So we're going to go to the shoot manager, and the destroy object, we're going to send an event. And game object, specify game object. I'm going to send the event to the spawn controller this time. And the event we're going to send is caught. And then we want to add a point here as well. So let's do an int add here as well. Int add. And here we had that one global variable, the score variable. And we're going to add a 1 point there. Let's just see what happens if we play now. And we have our old cube there, so we need to delete that. But let's just try and play the game. So we're going to shoot the blue cube, and now some weirdness happens. We're shooting these cubes, and lots and lots of cubes appear. This is just crazy. Points increase like crazy as well. It's madness. So now what's going on is when we're shooting the cube, it has time to run through this many times, this FSM. And that's why it's just starting to generate a lot of cubes, because it sends that caught event, and it's going to spawn more cubes, and things go crazy. So let's add a little bit of a cooldown phase here. So after we've done all this, let's add a wait state. Wait action. And let's make it wait 1 second. And then we go to the finished. Okay, so now let's just see if that makes any difference. So we're starting. There's a red cube. Okay, so now things are working. No crazy increase in points, and no crazy swarms of extra cubes. So things are good. So now I'd like to have that cooldown period after I've shot, so that the laser sight disappears when I've actually pressed the trigger, so we don't get this kind of crazy lightsaber thing. Well, that would be a great idea for a tutorial, but this is supposed to be a gun. So let's go to the draw line manager, and let's add a new state. We call it cooldown, and we've add a wait action here as well. Let's make that 2 seconds. And finish event. We don't have an event yet. Transition, so finished, and then finish event becomes a finished transition. So now we want to add another event here, and we call this event shot, and we'll make that global event, and then we'll add that transition here, shot, connected to our cooldown, and then once we've cooled down, we go back into the controller listener. So now we want to send the shot event from the shoot manager, and we're going to copy this one and paste it, and this time we want to send it to our draw line manager, and the event we want to do is shot. Okay, and that should do the trick. Let's test it if my logic is faulty. Okay, I'm getting points, Let's just see if we get a blue cube so I can shoot. And then there's the cooldown period for 2 seconds. So that's cool. So that's working. So let's do some cleanup here. Let's destroy this one. And let's put all these managers that we just made inside a game object. So create empty. It's like a container. So let's call it shooter managers. Let's put in brackets as well. And let's reset its transforms. And Raycast manager, draw line manager, and shoot manager. Let's put it inside here. So we have a little bit of control over what's what. So the basic mechanisms are out there. When you try and test it out and play the game, I'm sure you can find all kinds of tweaks that you can do to make the experience much more awesome. But I hope you learned the basics of how to shoot things in VR. If you like what you see, come and visit us on our Patreon page. I'm not really sure which side the card appears. It's somewhere there, but come and hang out with us there. If the Patreon page is not ready, you will get directed into our web page instead, and you can join our mailing list there as well. So thanks for watching, and have a good time shooting evil cubes. Until next time, bye. Shoot and shoot. Red one, and shoot, and shoot, and shoot, and then red one, and there we go, and shoot, and come on, shoot, and come on, get it ready, come on, boom, oh, come on, get it ready, boom, and oh, missed it, ah, yes, whew.